Hey everyone! So I've now finally played and finished the Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I've got thoughts. First of all, my first thought, why is it £60 on the PlayStation Network? I couldn't get this thing for so long because nowhere was selling it. And the cheapest place I could find it was eBay. So that's my first thought. But I didn't cover this. I played it in my own time, bought it myself. And this game showcases why I think it's okay for reviews to have outliers and be negative. Because that negative review is going to reflect someone's experience. And the thing is, going into this game, I watched a bunch of reviews and I thought, once I finished, once it was all said and done, very few of those reviews actually impacted or reflected my own experience. I liked it. Let's get some backstory first. I played this game at E3 last year, and I loved it so much. That little slice of gameplay left such a strong impression on me. Honestly, when it comes to Final Fantasy combat, I've not loved a system since it was turn-based. I'd say since Final Fantasy X. And when I played Final Fantasy VII Remake for half an hour, it sold me instantly. It was instantly understandable what that combat system was and the compromises it makes between modern action and classic Final Fantasy VII. It made so much sense immediately. That entire sequence, the entire bombing section of that demo, was moment-to-moment greatness. It didn't feel like there was any second that was wasted. Now, going into the full game, that section's still there, it's still amazing, but it's kind of deceptive of the rest of the game. So I feel like Final Fantasy VII Remake has a lot of downtime. More downtime than uptime. It feels like this game wastes your time a lot. And I will go into a few examples of why I think that. So first and foremost, there are a lot of follow the NPCs down a long corridor moments. Those are my least favorite moments of Uncharted, but they times it by 10 here. It happens constantly, all the time. So there are lots of moments where the game just has these dialogue exchanges going. They're not really core to the story. The core story moments happen in cutscenes. So these walking sections are just kind of, I guess, character building moments. But they are so slow. they are so slow and they are so frequent. And there are also tons of moments you're just sort of squeezing through a gap and it's clear the game needs to load. But it happens so often. It's not even like it's not done in a way that hides loading, because you think to yourself, boy, this isn't organic. Like, this happens all the time. And there are even moments where you don't need to be sliding anymore. Like, there's this part where Cloud's squeezing past a truck, and there's clearly space that you can start walking, but he's still sliding. So, this sounds like nitpick now. So let me get into the major points I don't like. So, the dungeon design in this game is very basic. I think a lot of the reasons people didn't like Final Fantasy XIII are present in Final Fantasy VII Remake. If you pause the game at any moment and look at the map, what you'll see is a straight line. This was often pointed out as a criticism of 13, and 7 it pulls it off better, but it's still very similar level design. It's clear that a lot of 13's influence was rubbed off on the 7 remake. And it's not bad necessarily, but there are points where it is pushed to its limits. Like, there's this point where you're underground in the tunnels on a train track, and you're just sprinting. You're just sprinting for a long time. Sometimes it's broken up by fights, but if you remove those fights, then what you have left is just this long tunnel. And there are points in the original that have been stretched out to an hour. So just little sections, little like 5-minute sections, are now an hour long in the remake. And it really does push it further than it needs to go. So the original Final Fantasy VII, I looked at my old PlayStation 1 save file, and I finished that game in 29 hours. The entirety of it, not just Midgar. The remake of Final Fantasy VII, I finished the Midgar portion, the entirety of the remake, in 27 hours. So this part 1, which is just Midgar, is roughly the same length as the entirety of the original. And it just doesn't really justify that time. So it still has those core moments that made the original Final Fantasy VII so good. They're still there, and a lot of them are still excellent. But the thing is, the original game consisted solely of those core moments. It was just moment-to-moment greatness. There was barely any downtime, any falter in quality. Like, if we're just thinking about Midgar, think about, like, the bombing mission at the start, meeting Tifa, just going along the second mission. All that happens very fast, very rapidly. In the remake, boy, do they take their time. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to take your time and expand upon more of the elements. Like, when you first come to the slums, that's a great moment. Like, going into the slums and see how expansive it is, see what risks people are really facing, what their lives are really like. That was a great moment. And the remake has lots of new great moments. Like when you're on the upper plate and you're really seeing how people live up there. That kind of stuff was never really in the original. And like when you're parachuting above Midgar, that's a great cutscene. That's a brilliant moment. Jessie is a brilliant character in the remake. They've expanded upon her fantastically. But then I think about all the moments where it doesn't justify what it's building. There are tons of sections in the remake you could cut. You could cut them, and nothing would be lost. The game would carry on as normal without those moments. So let me bring up some examples of wasting your time. There's a point in the game where there's this very simple puzzle. All you have to do is find these lamps and turn them off to put power into a generator. Because they're using up power, you've got to use that power to move this thing. So you're going along this catwalk where everything looks the same, and you just got to turn off these lamps. It takes ages, but it's so easy. Like it's not taking up any of your brain to process where to go. You're just going through these very similar environments, doing something that feels unimportant. The crane with the hand. So in the original, there's this point where you're going up to the wall market, and on your way there is this hand. And it's just part of the background. That's all it is. And Square looked at that hand and said, hey, what if we turn that into a puzzle? Only they don't just do it once, they do it multiple times. And it's not really a puzzle. So here's the gist of it. You have this hand, you control it with this crane. And what you do is you put the crane down, make Aerith get on it, and then move it somewhere else and she hops off. Simple, right? The only thing is, the animations take forever. So there's so much sitting around, and you're just waiting her to get on and off and on and off. And if you want all the items, you've got to be there for even longer. So this dungeon, I think, took me around an hour. It's easy. It's just so dull. And there's just moments where I just thought to myself, I'm not having fun anymore. God. And that's not how I wanted to feel about this. I was really excited for this remake. It felt like they had something to tell, like a point to make, by making Midgar its own game. But to me, it doesn't justify that. I think they could have cut a lot of the new stuff. And maybe I've even just gone the full length of making the entirety of Final Fantasy VII in this. And I'm not annoyed at the principle of that. I think if you are going to make Midgar your own game, go for it. Just the thing is, there's so much padding. There's so many moments of downtime. I'm thinking to myself, when going through these moments when I'm just following an NPC, or going along these corridors, or going through these dull dungeons, I thought to myself, boy, I wish I was just doing the core moments. I wish I was just going like into the wall market and fighting the giant robot and things like that. It's just, there's so many moments that just don't justify themselves. But then on the flip side, there's lots of moments that do. Like there's lots of great moments from the original, which are still great here. The entire wall market section, that's brilliant. That's so good. There's some great moments in this. The boss fights are mostly all good too. But then there's moments like going through the train graveyard, which are now full of these annoying ghost enemies. You could have cut that. That didn't need to be there. And the thing is as well, a lot of these moments get in the way. Like, there's a point where, you know, I don't want to spoil anything, but I'll point to original plot points. So there's the point where the plate falls. And you want to get there, but the story's like, it's chasing its tail along the way. It's throwing all these other moments to almost distract you from getting there. And like that's okay, I feel like, to like throw a wrench at the player. But I'm just like, boy, I want to push the story forward. Why are you throwing all this meaningless filler at me? Because it is meaningless. These points never come back. There's no point to them. So yeah, I mean, the music, incredible. The price of this game is worth it for the soundtrack alone. The music's so good. The visuals, they're inconsistent. Like sometimes the character models are amazing. But then like you turn the camera around to be somewhere you're not meant to be looking, and it looks rough. And sometimes it's not even when you're like where you're not meant to be looking. Sometimes the skybox will be a JPEG, like a really low quality one. And the characters will say, look, Cloud, look at that view. And you look down and it's awful. Why are you drawing attention to this awful view? But yeah, I mean, the core of the game, the combat is so good. And I feel like if future parts just get rid of the fluff, if they have the moment-to-moment greatness of the original, if they're just pure quality, it can still be great. It can still go down in history as a brilliant game. But part 1, to me, just feels disappointing. It's not just that it's new content. I'm cool with new content. I'm cool with them changing stuff in the remake. And the remake does change stuff. It goes wild at points, and I'm all for that. I'm all for the weird plot points. The ending, it's stupid. I love it. I think that's a great ending. And the game begins on a really high note. It ends on a high note. And maybe that's why the lasting impression for a lot of people is good. But remember the parts in between. Remember when you're just walking at this super slow speed and you can't speed up and you've got to keep out there for 10 minutes a go. Remember the points where you're going through these stupid dungeons. Remember the simple level design. I think as time goes on, maybe I'm just being cynical. I don't want to be cynical. I think as time goes on, I think people are going to look back on part 1 as the weaker one. And maybe I think they've started to already. I pointed out my thoughts on Twitter, and I expected to be greeted with, people just saying, oh, you're dumb. But people agreed. Some people do agree. So maybe that's just something that's going to become more apparent as time goes on. And I know this video is going to be met with a bunch of dislikes, but just keep into account, I wanted to love this game. I don't take any pride out of being cynical. In fact, when people do take pride out of being cynical, I don't like that. I don't put money down on a game wanting to hate it. I wanted to love this thing. And there are moments I love. I think the characters are done justice. Every character is great in this remake. But I just wanted it to be a bit better. So I'm kind of rambling now, but my main takeaway is it didn't need to be this long. They could have cut half the game. It would have been better for it. Content isn't good just for being there. I'm of the opinion that shorter games, as long as they make the most of their length, are better than longer games. So if a game is 60 hours long, that means nothing to me. One of my favorite RPGs of all time, Chrono Trigger, it's barely longer than 20 hours. So that RPG that set the standard for so many others is so much shorter than a bunch of other RPGs many look fondly upon. But it makes so much out of its time. You can add more content to Chrono Trigger, but you're probably less of the value of it all. Because that content you add, if it's just added for the sake of it, then what's the point? That's what Final Fantasy VII does. It kind of wastes your time just by trying to add more and more when it doesn't need to. And I think it does that to justify itself. Square went into this saying Midgar's going to be part 1. And I don't know if it needed to. So yeah, I mean, that's my overall takeaway is I love the basis of this remake. I think it does a lot well. But just the majority of the time, and that's the thing, it is the majority of the time. The majority of the time, it's super slow. Those moments that are so bombastic, the moments that you love from the original, they're here. But they take up a small slither of the overall game. So to me, I think you could cut certain chapters. You could cut chapter 14. That didn't need to be there. You could cut, I think, chapter 5. That was the one with the... I can't remember which one that was now, but I remember disliking that number. But yeah, I mean, this wasn't a structured thought of my opinions. I'm just throwing stuff out there. But let me know what you guys think about the remake as well. Do you dislike the same things that I dislike, or were they part of what makes it so good to you? Because I know opinions differ, and I love that. I think it's unsafe for any game to just be okay to love. Because when you get to that point, it's boring. It's boring if everything is just given a 10 out of 10. Because then there's no individuality or differences of opinion, and that's just dull. So I don't want to be someone who just hates something for the sake of it, and I'm not that person. But yeah, let me know what you think about this. And I'm gonna look down at the dislike bar. I imagine it's low. I imagine I imagine from the moment a lot of people clicked on this video, they went, nope. But let me know your thoughts, everyone. All right, see you later. Bye. The music, though. Listen to this. Before we go, listen to this. So good. Just buy the soundtrack.